Oh, there they are. People. I don't know. He got a four-wheel drive. That's he's
Keep it as close as I can.
it's fine. Oh, I told him I was going to but I'm sure it'll be fine. I have artificial driving. Joey, I have artificial ears here. She's got a rough with it too.
I want orange.
Oh. So I'm no, yeah, but this something the other day was environment's really making it specific. He really, okay, well, there you go, trying to get first shot. Oh, yeah, like, we want, oh, yeah, so anyway, sorry, I still just.
Snow left, because we were having.
I know. You know what I blame you guys? You got your snow at 6.
Yeah, we had a good. Right, yes. I was on here.
Oh, yeah.
We saw. Like you said, it's your nice.
Sorry.
I'm sure.
Oh, okay. Yeah, last one. I had a very, we had a very big tall cow today. Cow came by. And I sent him a video. This guy said to him that it should be illegal. Since it should be illegal. It used to be illegal. It should be illegal still. But compared to murder and other things, why they're thought. And thought, wow, that's very interesting to hear somebody say that. So I sent it to Cal. I sent it to Steph. I sent it to my brother. I sent it to I think 6 was that. I don't know. Yourself. The biggest thing that was how you're smoking. I think. We're not really upset. That's wrong. I said. Yeah, I'd say I discovered. Yeah, I don't think that's good. But I didn't say. I think it's gone. It does mean for the town. Right, true. I think very different. How do I like it? But if I was be yeah. Need your thing, right? It doesn't look good as something, but you don't really. Even to is there. Yeah, there's something that. Well, that upsets us later. And I'm talking. He got the rates and off everyone. Ethan, what time? Fishing, what time did we actually get back to work? Today? Yeah. After, was it 2:30? Yeah, on past 2. Because there's a lot of no. It doesn't count. And there was a girl. Because he was yeah. They want to make a little. No. It's just the work. I think I'm trying to fight change. Now all of a sudden, so there's really hospitals sitting in the right Christians there. It's very interesting. I'm seeing it. Just the rationing. Yeah. Because that's the one point. Cal on here too. To tell me what you is. He couldn't do that. Couldn't do that. He couldn't do that.
All right, everybody, good evening. We are streaming tonight. I was able to just reset the settings, so we are back to that. So if you are watching us, welcome. Sorry about last week and the disconnect, but we are not disconnected anymore. How is your husband? Is he feeling? Last night he was looking pretty pale. He's looking like he was a little anemic.
Sort of fellow.
What's that?
I'd say the bottom sort of fellow.
Yes, yes. Yes, I'm tracking with you there. No, that's good. That's good. He's holding it down. He's keeping it together. Good. Well, yeah, the man cannot afford to miss a day.
Good. Curse.
Yeah.
I could miss a month.
Yeah. At that point. All right. So how do you control people?
Fear.
Fear. Okay. Hunger.
Money.
Money. Greed. Figure out what they desire. Force. Loss.
Laws.
Laws, yes, laws. Yeah, external laws. One person said you find out what they love and take it away from them.
Consequences.
Consequences. Good. Yeah. Harlan brought up a good point because predominantly within society, laws are the means by which we control people. How effective a tool is that?
Well, it's a surface thing. It's an action thing, which arguably can go deeper. Like I always talk about speed limits. Why don't we speed? Well, we don't want to get a ticket.
Right.
Actually, right? When you get your driver's license, well, I don't speed because I don't want to get a ticket because I can't afford the points off my license because then I won't graduate to the
Right.
next level. But eventually you realize, oh, speed limits are there because if you blow a tire at 140, it's a substantially different outcome than blowing a tire at 100.
Right.
You just
Exactly.
have to understand. So those consequences keep you safe until you develop an understanding.
Good. Yeah. So they act as an external thing until there's an
But
internal.
it can't be. It's not the be all.
No. Good. Excellent. Good. I would say for the most part, laws work well. I mean, we have people in prison, but for the most part, as Canadians, laws do work well. We live in, people behave civilly towards one another. I read a very interesting article this week about people who use their turn signal when no one's around.
My goodness, I did that. Yet we were out in the middle of nowhere. Rain was. Often the only thing is like a hundred phone over there. I'm like, click. I'm like, what am I doing?
And it actually talked, and the article says yes, Bonnie. Thank you for that correction. That one of the things they said that people who do use their turn signal have self-regulation. They're internally motivated, internally governed. They respect this idea of just polite and civil society, and it was actually kind of an affirming thing that people who don't. So I don't know if you use your turn signal. Donna actually uses the turn signal when she pulls into the yard at the farm. And I went, there's no one for a mile, literally. But she dutifully turns her turn signal on when she pulls into the yard.
I was kind of embarrassed when I did that. I said,
It's a funny feeling. Because my neighbor does about 90 to 140K down our grid. She she.
Go.
And we can always tell who's driving by what the speed rate is.
See the vehicle or not.
Exactly. How much dust is around the Murano. Paul begs this argument, and the root of Galatians is what controls behavior. I know he's not thinking that, but that becomes the fabric weaving through it. And the argument is that the law is to some degree an effective means of controlling behavior, but ultimately it only produces death. And then he takes us to an alternative. Now, in particular, Paul is arguing initially about what determines our relationship and our behavior with God himself. Are we motivated by fear? Are we motivated by law? Are we motivated by the outcome? Or are we motivated by something internal? But then as the book flows, he shifts the focus from that eternal relationship to a very external, and that is how we get along with one another. So if you've got your notes in front of you, and I trust that you've got a copy there, and so that just begins with a very simple statement, having discredited righteousness through the law, Paul now lands on the main application of the letter. If we aren't going to live by the law, how then shall we live? And we've asked this before. If you don't have the law, how do we live? What governs us, right? Think about kids at summer camp when the counselors aren't around, or kids when the teachers or kids when their parents aren't around. What is the governing law when parents and supervision are gone for children?
Biggest wins.
The biggest wins, right? Sheer might. The law of the playground. Might makes right. And or the golden rule, whoever has the gold makes the rules, as they say. So this summary is found in Galatians chapter 5, verse 6. For in Christ Jesus, neither circumcision nor uncircumcision means anything. What does he mean by that phrase?
External does not affect the internal.
Absolutely. It doesn't really matter. The outside laws aren't going to matter. Long hair or short hair means nothing. Whether your dress is at the knee or above the knee doesn't mean anything.
No, he just said circumcision.
Okay, yeah. Those kind of external rules that we define the holiness of a person, especially those of us who grew up in a fairly conservative church. You knew who was holy by what records they listened to or whatever they did, right? And he says, no, it doesn't mean anything. What does he mean by doesn't mean anything?
In salvation.
Right. In salvation, it doesn't mean. Of course, those things mean something, right? But in regards to our relationship with God, those are the. But what is the big key? Faith. Dylan? Working
Through love.
through love. That's
There's another verse that is very similar, and it says
There's many
that same
verses.
idea. That's almost exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
But it says nothing else matters,
Yes.
and it's another one of these letters. I can't remember which one it is.
Spurgeon said this: when faith has anything to do, she walks to the field with love at her side. Two graces are inseparable. I like that. You can't, those who have faith, love, and those, this sounds very 1960s, by the way. Those who love have faith. Those who have faith, love. I really should get more beads, you know? Yeah, yeah, exactly. We're going to, what is the latest one? Dig down into that phrase tonight. Unpack it. All right. So the first half of the book is this: circumcision means nothing, and he sets up a contrast. That is righteousness through the law and faith in love. So we have faith in love, we have righteousness through the law. So the opposite of love is hate. No, in this
Oh,
context.
sorry. Righteousness.
No.
Oh, I thought it was a chiastic.
It
Sorry.
is, no, in this case, it's not.
I was looking at the baby. I panicked.
Very good. Yes. Right. Or is it chiastic? They were saying that righteousness flows out of the law. So
Yeah.
I got lots of positive comments about my helper. Righteousness by faith, not by the law. Love by faith, not by the law. Everything flows from faith. This is Paul's ongoing argument throughout the New Testament. All right, let's take a look at verse 7 and 8 and 9. Danny, you want to read 5, 7, 8, and 9. In we go. Go, chapter 5.
Verse 5.
Verse 7, 8, and 9.
You ran well to enter before me in the truth. This persuasion does not come from him who calls you. A little leaven leavens a whole lump.
All right, he hits the brakes. And what does he say? Oh, come here.
Who hindered you from saying
Right. Why are you stopping doing this? Are you coming, kiddo? Are you going to help me out tonight? All right, on. But no, keep your pants, right? Okay. Good.
She's back.
She's back. Nope, she's gone.
Nice. What's the mark?
I just came for the marker. All right, see ya.
Come.
You make my life a happier place, kiddo. But I've lost track of you. Here we go. Dad's got you. All righty. So he hits the brakes and says, so what was happening in the church? They were making progress by faith. Then the Judaizers came along and said, no, you got to obey the law. And he hits the brakes and says, you were running well. Who stopped you? And the answer is them. Exactly. He doesn't name them. He doesn't know them. They're the Judaizers who stopped them.
No,
But-
Don Cherry, UP.
That's right. It's a generic. But what does he know about them? Verse 8 tells us one thing he does. He doesn't know them by name and he doesn't name them by name. But what is one thing he knows about them? They're not from God. Exactly, Dan. This persuasion doesn't come from God. So whatever's happening here is godless.
I have a small sidebar question.
Yeah.
This whole idea of the law. So they were convincing them of the law. Like, no doubt there's still law that apply. The Mosaic law, the Ten Commandments still apply.
Right.
So actually, I had a conversation with a guy about this the other day, and he said, "No, Ten Commandments don't apply anymore. Yeah, we're sure we're still not supposed to murder,
The moral law still applies.
right? But the moral of it, look at that." And so, I guess I get a bit confused on this idea of the law because we didn't abolish the law, but it's fulfilled. It's not our means of righteousness.
Precisely. You're
So
exactly right.
we're still those who love me will obey my commandments.
Right.
So there's still that, but there's also all this food laws and stuff.
Right.
They separate all of what was supposed to still be obeyed and what was not still supposed to be obeyed.
Right.
That's kind of what.
Okay. Very good. Let's take 2 steps back.
Now is not the time. That's fine.
No, this is a good time. So the purpose of the Mosaic law was multiplicity of it. There was a variety of reasons why it existed.
Right.
One was to keep them healthy.
Yep.
In other words, it really wasn't about righteousness. It just meant don't eat lobster because it'll poison you. Don't eat pork because it's trichinosis. So God gives the law for a variety of reasons. Part of the law is to create justice. When the poor come, part of the law was to maintain health. Part of the law was to. So these are the ceremonial laws.
Right.
But a big chunk of the law is about being right with God. So part of the law is about being right with your neighbor.
Yep.
If your neighbor's cow falls down the well, pick them up. Part of the law is about being right with the earth, rotation of crops and that kind of stuff. Part of the law is about being right in your family, husbands, all that. But there was this other element that was about being right with God. And what happened was that banner of being right with God got extended down. And they said that all of this makes me right with God. So if I don't eat pork, that makes me
just happen time. Because I look at that too and I go, okay, well, because the law.
Yes.
He made mud on the Sabbath.
Right.
So he broke the law.
Yes, he was a lawbreaker. He breaks the Sabbath.
Right.
Right. What had happened was they packaged it together as one inclusive idea and said that if we break any of this, God's going to get mad at us.
So what was it? The original 613 that were actually that mattered?
Yes. Okay. Okay. Because you're on to something, Dylan, and I think it's worth exploring.
Okay. Because it gets to the point where we say, no, any rules are bad.
Right.
And I don't believe that's the case.
There's the 613, which is not an area code. And the 613 are the laws of Moses. And contained within them are these various facets, right? Like little gas bubbles of, how to treat your neighbor, how to wash your hands, how to treat the dead, what to do with the disease. And it was like this. They were all there together. When they kept the law, the nation was blessed. Then what happened was they started breaking the laws. Primarily, the biggest laws they broke were worship laws. They worshiped like the Canaanites. We saw today in Bible study at Shirley's that we have found archaeologically that there's a location where there are 20,000 urns full of animal and children's bones that were part of the Phoenician sacrificial system, right? That actually trickles into Israel, where we get in 2 Kings, we get notifications that the male prostitute temple prostitutes were operating within the temple itself in Solomon's porch, right? So all of this gets blurred together. And God says, you broke the law, and he exiled. Now, he doesn't say necessarily which laws, although he makes it pretty clear that there are certain ones that are more critical. What Israel then does and says, if we break any law, God's going to... So they got rid of the lines and said, you know what? It's all the same. And Paul agrees. To break one law is to break them all. He affirms that.
Right.
So the violation of either moral law, civil law, dietary law, judicial law,
ceremonial,
it's all one big law now. And so the line gets broken and this becomes one big law. And the violation of anything becomes an offense to God. And any offense to God leads to exile. So what they did was something clever. If I know that the law is I can only walk 1 mile on the Sabbath, that's the law. And if I break that law, in effect, I'm breaking all the laws. Paul affirms that. Therefore, what am I going to do? I'll set up a new law. Right? Why?
Can't even get close.
I'll never risk breaking the law again. So what we get now is this is the Torah. Torah.
The other one's the Mishnah, right?
Yes, very good.
I know Mishnah.
Very good. We get the additional laws. So they were to tithe. That's the law. They were to tithe on the first fruits. They were to, what are the Pharisees? Jesus said they tithe their mint. They were actually taking every 10th leaf off. So there's a real world example of them tithing. And that's for here. So this is the law they didn't want to break. And this is the law that was the burden. Jesus says to them, you add burdens. And he says, come unto me. My yoke is, this is the yoke of the law. And at the age of 13, you took on the yoke of the law. Bar mitzvah and Beth mitzvah. So where we would recognize today that within the law there are not only nuances, there's separation. There is moral law, there's ceremonial law, there's dietary law, all those things. For the Jews, it doesn't exist. It's all one law, because the breaking of one law is the violation of all laws. And that's because they got punished for breaking the law. And they didn't want to actually say, well, what law can we get away with breaking and not have God mad at us? The fact is, God gets mad at us if we break any law.
Maybe that'd be like a good topic to dig into a little bit more because still for me, I get the concept.
Yeah.
But it'd be interesting to really dig through and see at what point, like where in scripture does it really lay it out that it's like, you don't have to worry about, because I know like the towel comes down, take and eat what you want. And we see that.
Right. Okay, good. We're going to take one more time. So Jesus then fulfills the ceremonial law. He doesn't break the ceremonial law. Right. He goes to the temple, he worships, he does those. What he does is he says, I am the Lord of the other law, the Lord of the Sabbath. And he says, when it comes to dietary laws, social laws, he meets with a woman at the well. Yep. He touches Peter's mother, yep, who's dead.
Right.
Or not dead, she's sick. He touches the leper. So in what chapter he breaks 3 laws, including touching Peter's mother who's sick, would make him ceremonially unclean. He talks to a Samaritan, which makes him ceremonially unclean, and he raises the dead, which would make him ceremonially unclean. So it's Jesus who makes the break between the 2 laws, and he acknowledges that. And he fulfills all of this, and by his actions, he says, these laws, their purpose is no longer, it's no longer valid. You don't have to worry about them. Yeah. I've fulfilled them all. And then we get to the New Testament, we get to Acts, and the big debate is, what laws do we have to keep? So we get the Council of Jerusalem, which debates all this stuff. And they said, all right, for the Gentiles, what laws do we have to get them to keep? And they say, avoid sexual immorality, don't eat things that are offered to blood. And he begins with that. Yep. Okay, so we get that. By the time we get to Paul, who works, they boil it down to don't be immoral, which we'll get to tonight. So when it comes to the law, there's 2 sides of it. We have to say, are there laws that we keep in order to make God happy? Yeah. Well, no, to be righteous.
Oh, not to be righteous.
Yeah, sorry, I'm going to rephrase it. To be righteous. No. No, because we can't achieve righteousness through the law.
Okay, but there are righteous things that we have done, but I guess to be made right with God.
Right. That's why Paul says, not by works of righteousness, which we have done.
Is there things that we can do to make us unright with God?
Yes, called sin.
Right. So it's kind of like,
yes,
you can.
It's a paradox.
Doing it's no good, but doing it's real bad.
That's right. It's a paradox. There's nothing you can do to be right with God, but everything you can do to be wrong.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Fulfill the law, great. Doesn't matter. Break the law, horrible.
That's exactly it. There's nothing you can do to get righteous with God, but man, it's easy to become unrighteous.
Try selling that.
Oh, yeah.
Everything right means nothing, but doing it wrong, oh boy.
Yeah, that you nailed it.
Selling that.
Yeah, exactly. That righteousness, if you want to be right with him. But, okay, and yes, because you're asking the question we're about to address. Because the question then is, how do we then live? What does a righteous person live like? How do we live with our neighbors? Yeah. governs our behavior. All right. So we know that righteousness does not govern our behavior with God because we're righteous.
Right.
But then how do we live and care for others? What laws govern our behavior? So we know with God that there is no law to make us righteous. Our righteousness is in Christ. He became sin for us who knew no sin, that we might become the righteousness of Christ, of God in him. So then how do we live with other people? That's the question we're asking, right? What laws govern us? Well, we could say, okay, so I get it. The righteousness doesn't make me right, but I'll be governed in my relationships with it by the Mosaic law. That makes sense. If we followed the Mosaic law, that would keep us right with each other. Right. We could say, okay, I'm going to treat my neighbor this way. I'm going to wash my hands. I'm not going to eat lobster. I'm not going to eat pork. Is that making sense? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, very good, Arlen. We're going to get to that. Yes, you're ahead of the curve. Yes, and conscience, not consciousness. That's a different thing altogether. And Paul says that their conscience is seared, so they can't even know they're doing something wrong. So you're right. Now, you're asking two questions. They're from the same pot of earth, the law. And we say, okay, so good, the law, that's all taken care of. So maybe the law should still apply to behavior, to diet, to
Well, I
music.
think if you look at it, it's like, okay, if you do those things, it's kind of one of those both, it works both ways. If you love God and love your neighbor as yourself, well, guess what? You're going to do, these things will be done. They will be done. Like, I understand that they don't make you righteous, but it does
With God.
mean that's right.
But you're supposed to treat your brother righteously.
Right. But all these things still, it's not like, well, those don't matter. And
No,
that's kind of,
there's something that even matters.
I don't believe.
There's something that matters even greater, which we'll get to. Okay, we're tracking. Little divergence, but we're back. Okay, so first thing he says is, as Danny read for us, and then he says, a little leaven leavens the whole lump. In other words, what? One bad idea can ruin a whole day. So if you get one idea wrong about the law, you are in serious, serious trouble. What do you got? You got fish. Fish? How did you get fish and I didn't? All right. This truth working in love, by the way, is called a passive. That means love is the source of faith. If we understand it as a middle, it means that love issues out of faith. They almost sound exactly the same, but there's a subtle distinction. You're gonna steal my marker again, but you're trading me a cookie. No, we're not going to trade a cracker for this. Okay, all right. What Paul wants us to know is that doctrine determines growth. A little leaven. So here we go. It answered Dylan's question. Joni, want to read verse 10? Galatians chapter 5.
Yep.
I have confidence in you, in the Lord, that you will adopt no other view, but the one who is disturbing you will bear his judgment, whoever he is.
Isn't that, Paul says, I'm hopeful that you're going to do what?
You'll stick to your guns.
You'll have this figured out. He says, as far as the guy who's disturbing you,
He'll get this.
he'll get it, and he doesn't know who he is. Whoever he is. I like that. This is the same thing that happened in Corinth, right? There's this guy.
But it sounds like there is a guy, not a group.
Yes, and I think the whoever could be y'all whoever. Yeah, whoever he is, or whoever they are, or whatever Judaizers. I mean, Peter was guilty of this, right? All right. Then he does a little bit of a defense. Dylan, you want to read 10, 11, and 12? Yeah. No, don't take my
But
notes.
I, brethren, if I still preach circumcision, why am I still persecuted? Then the stumbling block of the cross has been abolished. I wish that those who are troubling you would even mutilate themselves.
Good. Paul does defend himself on many occasions. He defends it and he says, look, if I am preaching this false law, then why am I being persecuted? He says, the very fact that I'm being persecuted means I'm not agreeing with them. And the trouble of the cross is gone if I preach the law. And I going back to grandpa or dad here. There we go. Perfect. Oh, Mark ready. I wish they'd emasculate themselves, which is clear. All right, we want to get to the heart of this. So here's the question that we go back to Dylan's initial question. How do we then live with one another? How does faith work through love? How do we live out this righteousness if not by keeping the Torah? If I don't have a list of how I should treat you, what's the problem with the list of how I should treat you?
It just becomes a list of rules. It doesn't become something.
Exactly. Okay, good. It just becomes another list of rules that I can ignore or I have to memorize. What else is there wrong with the list?
It doesn't apply the same. Right?
It doesn't apply the same to everybody. Okay, keep going. What else is wrong with the list? You can't. It's impossible to keep. Good. Also, there could be circumstances that arise the list doesn't cover. One size does not fit all, right? So I can have a rule about dealing with X, Y, and Z, and Q pops up. Now I don't have a law. So now I do. Well, now I have to make another law. Well, who gets to make the law? Who decides? So what we need is what the law is sockets. The imperial sockets, quarter inch, half inch, and life is metric. It doesn't fit. So what do we have that fits all?
Crescent wrench.
A crescent wrench or a vice grip and a hammer. Crescent wrench or a vice grip, right? You need something adaptable. It's like those filter wrenches, the ones that you buy, or you get the belt filter wrench that fits any filter. It doesn't always work, but it's a universal fit. So Paul says the problem with the law is, in part, it doesn't fit every circumstance, because now we're dealing with Phoenicians and Greeks and Macedonians and laws in Crete and behaviors that are happening in Macedonia that didn't happen in Jerusalem. He says we need a universal one-size-fits-all law that works in every circumstance, that I can apply it no matter what the circumstance. I can apply this rule. And that is 13, 14, and 15. Tashinga, take it away.
We were called to freedom. We were called to freedom, brothers. Only do not choose your freedom as a surety for the flesh, but through love serve one another. For the whole law is fulfilled in one word: you shall love your neighbors as yourself.
Verse 15 as well.
But if you bite and devour one another, watch out that you are not consumed by one another.
What a great metaphor. If you're nitpicking and biting, that will destroy you. So Paul says, the universal tool. What's the vice grip? Allen wrench? Not Allen wrench. That's very specific.
Love your neighbor as yourself.
Love your neighbor. And how does he define it there? Take a look in but do what?
Serve.
Serve through love. The serving me. The universal tool of how to behave around other people is to serve them. Serve. What does that mean? Humility.
Put them ahead of you.
Humility. Put them ahead of you. Yeah. Seek their best interest.
There's another verse where don't seek your own good, but seek the good of others.
That's right. Paul's repeating this over and over again.
In the Bible.
You look a little pale there.
I have.
You'll get this everywhere. 1 John, love one another. So he is now very careful to start to define love. And the first definition he gives is service. Why does that work? Where 613 laws might not.
Well, because it shifts the perspective of putting the other person ahead of yourself.
Yeah.
Considering them above yourself.
Exactly.
Like terms that humbling yourself.
So I have a friend who has a dietary need. There might be laws that deal with, but they don't deal with that person's specific dietary need. So I need a law now, right? I go, well, now we don't have that. Back in those days, they didn't have it. But what's the rule? I put their needs ahead of my needs, right? And it's a very quick question to ask yourself. Am I serving this person? Am I putting their needs ahead of mine? And it's almost a universal fit everywhere. So I'm in traffic, right? I'm at the grocery store. I'm at the post office. All these things. How do I spend my money? Right? I serve the needs of my community. I serve the needs of others. How do I spend my time? I serve the needs of others. So I have someone with young children over at my house. He'll pick what movies I watch with them, what games I play with them, right? It all becomes a very quick, and how hard is that in our brain? Well, actually, it might take some time. I might have to think about it, but soon enough, it becomes second nature. I will now serve. So my neighbor's got an icy sidewalk. I don't have to think anymore, right? I don't need a law that says, thou shalt shovel Shirley's sidewalk. If you're watching Shirley, we don't need a law. Because all I have to do is put her needs ahead of mine, or I have to serve her. So it's a beautifully concise, and it's you shall love your neighbor as yourself, which is
I think it cleans that one.
yeah in the law. He's quoting the Old Testament. All right, this is a new kind of slavery. Elena, if you want to read Romans 13:8, and Ethan, could you read James 2:8? Are you sharing a phone tonight, you two?
Romans 13:8.
Yes, please.
Except to love one another, for the one who loves his neighbor has fulfilled the law.
Fulfilled the law. To love your neighbor is to fulfill the law. I started a bad habit here. James 2:8.
James 2.
If, however, if, however, you are fulfilling the royal law according to the scripture, you shall love your neighbor as yourself, are doing well.
So James, Paul, Jesus, this is the universal law. All right. So now having established this, he picks it up. We move into people's favorite passage. 16 and 17, Joyce.
For the sinful nature died spirit. They are in conflict, so that you do not do what you want. But if you are led by the Spirit, you are under the law.
All right. Now we set up contrast. I love black and white photography, right? High resolution, high contrast photography, things appear better. By the way, we all look better in black and white. All our flaws are gone. We look high res. So, all right. So what's the contrast?
Spirit and law.
Right. So spirit versus, it sounds like life. It's the spirit versus the law. And we're supposed to walk in the spirit. Or Joyce, your translation said live. Right?
Says
Okay, we walk in the spirit.
led by.
Yep. These are all which he's going to really delve into tonight. And they are at what with each other?
Oh, it's their in opposition.
Yeah, they're in opposition to one another, right? The flesh and the spirit are in opposition. That in order to keep you from doing whatever you want, right? You cannot. So now he's going to start showing us, all right, what does it look like to walk in the spirit, be led by the spirit, and what does it look like to walk in the law or the flesh, if the case may be, and be led by the flesh. So this is an echo back to Galatians 3:3. Begin and remain in the spirit. So he picks up verse 18. If you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. Notice, interesting, under versus led. Which would you rather be? Under the weight of the law or led by the Spirit? Led is like taking you by the elbow and going, let's go, right? Being under is under the crushing weight of it, the heavy burdens. All right. So, what does life under the law look like? Bonnie, verses 19 through 21.
Our sexual adultery, witchcraft, hostilities, strife, jealousy, outbursts, anger, selfish ambition, dissensions, factions, envy, drunkenness, drowsy, and things like these, on which I forewarn you, just as I have forewarned you, that those who practice such things will not inherit evil.
Right. We'll get into those in a minute. What is the consequence of being under the law?
No inheritance.
No inheritance. And now Paul gives us one of those great list, and I'm going to walk through them quickly and just expound a little bit upon each word. All right, immorality. That is the word harlot. So that's the Greek term porneia, from where we get the word pornography, right? So the immorality is tied to this idea of harlotry. Impurity, that's just a blanket term for any kind of sexual immorality. Sensuality, this is the public flaunting of sexual desires. That is, we're talking about brothels, temple prostitution, those kind of, which is interesting. When you read this list, this tells you what the world was like. If you want to know what Galatia was like, this is what the world was like. We had this discussion with, I can't remember what one with all the artworks, and they were kind of troubling. Idolatry, of course, worshiping anything in the place of God. Sorcery is a fascinating word because it's the Greek word pharmakia, from which we get the word pharmacy from. Sorcery,
Magician.
yes, and it's the use of drugs to induce a religious state. So think about cultures that use drugs to have these heightened religious experiences. That's what sorcery is. Sorcery is using drugs to alter you have a religious experience. It's where we get the word magic from. Okay. Enmities, this is the word of hostile towards each other. Strife means fighting for prizes. Jealousy is the word zealous, that is, self-centeredness. Outbursts of anger, this is thumos, when we get, the idea of heat. Sudden, uncontrolled outbursts of rage. Disputes, self-seeking, ambitious, that knows no bounds. Dissensions and factions, these go together, dogmatic, dividing people into larger groups. We were talking last night that we want to do a men's night where we watch a hockey game. And the debate was, should we watch the Olympics where we can all cheer together, or should we watch like an Edmonton versus, some other where we can be at odds with one another? And somebody was quite concerned. They said, well, no, we should watch a game where we can all cheer together because, the church needs to dwell in unity. And I thought, you tender souls, you. So we are going to watch a Team Canada game so we can all cheer together. So, this is how it works. It trickles right down literally into what hockey we watch. So this is how Christianity works. It's everywhere. This division, envy, good old Stoic, envy is to grieve at another's good. And what does drunkenness mean? Pretty straightforward. And carousing is the word orgy. So drunken orgies. All right. So, is this list extensive?
And
And the like. It's like Paul's going down this list. And whatever else comes to mind. He gives a catch-22 or a catch-all at the end. And that's why this list is not exhaustive, but it pretty much is exhausting. It's this list of and the consequence of that kind of life, without even looking at the Bible, what is the consequence of that kind of life? Death, no matter what, right? I don't care who you are. Death of relationships, physical death, car accidents, and yet this is the life people live, right? And no wonder when people became Christians in the early church, they were so starkly different because this was society. This is like being a Christian in Vegas or, in the hotbed of New Orleans during Mardi Gras, or any debaucherous place you can think of. Christianity was that. So death will not inherit. So then he sets things up in the contrary. This is the fruit of the law, or the fruit of the flesh. Now, Dylan, I'd like you to write a song called "Now the Fruit of the Flesh is licentiousness, immorality, sexual behavior, perversion, corruption, alcoholic orgies."
Galatians 5, verse 22 very well.
Yes, if you could get them to do 5:21.
5:19.
5:19.
But it's interesting he says the deeds versus the fruit, which
Right.
it's kind of the same thing, right?
It is the first thing.
Is the deeds. It is absolute, but it's not the deeds of the spirit. I like that, John.
I want Bonnie to play along. And the deeds of the fruit of the flesh is kids, number 1, drunkenness, carousing, and
Deeds of the flesh is not a rape.
Yeah. All right, that's what he's doing here.
Challenge accepted.
The challenge accepted. All right. Isn't that funny? We don't focus on this portion because we shouldn't. But the fruit of the Spirit is, ready, go.
kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things, there is no law.
Well done. All right, let's rock through these. Love, this is our friend agape, used uniquely by the early church to designate self-giving behavior. Agape is the summary of selfless servanthood. Joy, this is the attitude that rejoices, rejoice in all things, not in all circumstances, but having a heart that is rejoicing in the goodness of God in all things. And it's very difficult to do, as we were praying tonight for some difficult situations. How does one find joy in what's happening in Iran, right? Peace, this is the peace of Christ versus the peace of Caesar, the Pax Christos, in contrast to Pax Romana. This is my new one. We talked about this last night at Elders about patience. Interesting that patience is the third virtue, the one we don't talk about. In the first 3 centuries of the church, 3 or 4, I think it's 4, I have to remember, but 3 or 4 of the early church fathers wrote treatises on peace. They didn't write on patience, I mean. They didn't write treatises on love or joy, but they focused on patience. And patience actually became the cardinal virtue by which the early church gained ground and bore its testimony. So fascinating that he chooses patience. One writer said, patience is what people who don't have a choice have. So if you have a choice, you don't need patience, right? I can choose. I can be active. I can engage, and I have agency. But if I don't have agency, what's the only thing I have left?
Choice.
Patience. All I have is patience. So patience is the third fruit of the Spirit. Long suffering in the face of provocation. Seeing Christ is the model of patience, right? He doesn't react. He is long suffering. God has been patient with us, and we need to be patient with others. Kindness, the way of life of Jesus. This is the yoke, positive, accepting attitude. Faithfulness, this is the sense of loyalty and trustworthiness. Gentleness sometimes gets described as meekness, but it's this submissive spirit. It's an interesting word. It's the imagery of a domestic animal. So think about a horse who's been domesticated. What are they? Gentle, right? Although they could kill you quite easily, right? But they are gentle creatures. Gentleness is not weakness. It's power under control. Right? And so we think of the large horse or the large dog. And the Greeks hated it. It was not on the list. They saw it as weakness. And it is uniquely a Christian virtue. Self-control is the capstone of this list. Self-control characterizes maturity. And against such things, there's no law. Why? Because this is the inner law. We don't need outer laws. If you possess these virtues, do you need the law? No. So, in answer to Dylan's question, how then do we behave towards one another? We serve one another through love. The Spirit then leads us. And what is the evidence of the Spirit-led life? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, self-control. And I keep forgetting the rest, but this is the evidence of the Spirit. This is the evidence of
The absence.
the absence of death.
See, and sometimes we would say, I don't see any evidence of the fruit of the Spirit in your life.
Right.
And you might argue, well, the evidence of absence, the absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, but we do in this case have that. That it's like, well,
Right.
We produce fruit.
Yes.
Produce fruit.
So the evidence of the Spirit of an alcoholic might be them not drinking. We say they're not doing anything,
That's right.
but they're not doing something.
Do
Right.
what we do is a reflection
Absolutely.
of just Lord of our life.
Absolutely. And what we don't do is also evidence.
Yes.
It's evidenced by our not behaving a certain way.
Yeah.
And so some of these are passive, like patience is a bit of a passive thing,
Yeah.
although it can be active as well. I can, sit in the dark. And some of these are more active. They flow back and forth. All right. So then we're going to wrap this up pretty quick. The continuing contrast, verse 24. Now those who belong to Jesus Christ have still, you still have to die though. Crucified, its passions and desires. How do you deal with all this stuff? You got to put it to death, right? Something has to die. But life in the Spirit, let's follow the Spirit as well. And he's not quite done yet. Almost done. He's not quite. Because he still wants to answer the question, what does it look like to be led by the Spirit? What's the behavior?
Not boastful.
Good. Yeah. So if we ask someone, what does it look like when someone's under the influence of the Spirit? What is their, we've had all kinds of experiences and all kinds of debates about this. But Paul wants to make it very clear what life in the Spirit, under the Spirit, being led by the Spirit. First, he says these are these cardinal virtues, and then he's going to start looking for behavior. And he now gives us a list. 26, where are we up to, Doug?
Let us not become conceited, provoking, and envying each other.
Good. So what's the first evidence of someone living in the Spirit that we can see by how they live? They're not boastful, right? Humble people. Okay. Secondly, they're not, take a look at 26. Provoking. They don't challenge one another in a negative sense. We're supposed to provoke one another to good works, but not in a negative sense. And we're not supposed to. Wait a minute. Don't envy one another. That should ring a bell. Go back to Exodus. It's going to ring a bell.
No, that doesn't apply anymore.
And yet there it is. And what's the 10th commandment?
The coveting one.
Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's donkey, wife, cow, or any of thy neighbor's possessions. What is the life of the Spirit? Thou shalt not envy. Thou don't envy. Funny that as we walk in the Spirit, we keep the 10 commandments. Right. We don't keep the 10 commandments to be right with God, but when we're right with God, we'll keep them.
Not validated.
Not at all.
They're just not righteous.
Precisely. But they are the evidence of righteousness. So, what's the first commandment? No, it's not quite. It's close. Don't have any other idols, right? What's the sign of lawlessness? Idolaters, right? Give me another commandment in the 10 commandments.
Don't steal.
Don't steal. Right there. Don't envy one another. Don't want with them your neighbor. Don't be pugnacious. Honor your parents. All of them fit in these categories. You can fit the 10 commandments into this chapter. All right. So and then chapter 6, verse 1, Shelley.
Spiritual arts restore such a person in the spirit of judgment, each one looking to yourself so that you are not tempted as well.
So we're not supposed to look to ourselves, but we are. Why? In what area? So that we don't actually fall into sin. So what's the next evidence of the walking in the Spirit? In chapter 6, verse 1.
I would say it could be that you can identify sin.
Yeah.
If you're aware of it.
So if we go back to serving one another, how do we serve each other here?
Holding each other accountable.
Hold each other. If I see you sinning, how do I serve you? I don't serve you by helping you sin. I serve you by actually restoring you. Right? So all of this is flowing out of this is how we serve one another. This is the fruit of the Spirit living out. If you see a brother caught in a wrong, spiritual maturity restores them in what spirit? Gentleness. Right? Interesting. He says, don't challenge one another. That's the negative side of it. I see what you're doing. I challenge you on your sin. Right? That's the negative behavior.
We're not supposed to judge.
That's right. And yet we are. Because in a spirit of gentleness, I come and say, I want to restore you back to relationship with God. All right. So these are all right. If, by the way, interesting, this is a third-class conditional, meaning it's probably going to happen. Spiritual maturity is having the mind of Christ, living out the fruit of the Spirit, having a servant's heart, serving fellows, one another. And this word of restore is the word resetting the bone.
When it says, look to yourself if you're not tempted, is that in line with the idea that if you are a recovered or recovering alcoholic, that maybe you're not going to go deal with that issue? No. Some of the best people to help you with your sin are those who have known it.
Yes, in some areas. And you have to be very self-aware.
Right.
So it might not be good for an alcoholic to help another alcoholic,
Right.
or to go to the bar to try and rescue an alcoholic.
But that might be a touch hypocritical if you are a practicing alcoholic.
Yes, exactly. It's about self-awareness of your own weaknesses, because it's easy to get caught in their weaknesses and start bringing each other down rather than helping each other.
Because could it mean something else other than that? Because other than that, it's like you too will not be tempted. Because I thought,
Yes.
self-righteousness is make sure there's no log in your own eye, but it says tempted, that you
Right.
are not tempted.
I mean, the grossest and largest illustration is if someone has a problem with women, I'm not going to go to the strip club to help them, right?
Right.
That's not going to help me. So and if you have a problem in a specific area, you need to be careful that this doesn't become a falling in your own life. Not that you can't help someone, and oftentimes those who have been through
That's
that.
not meeting them where they're at.
No, that's right.
About
It's about helping them beyond that. All right, we got to wrap it up. Okay, bear one another's burdens and thereby fulfill the law of Christ. Sound familiar? Fulfilling the law of love. He starts out with serving is the fulfillment, bearing one another's burdens. That's what do servants do? They carry. Yeah. The word here is backpack, like the military soldier's backpack. So how do I help you? I carry your burden. Now that burden may be grief, that burden may be loss. There's all kinds of burdens that people carry. But I serve you by being the one who's willing to carry it with you. And I suspect we've all been through that when someone's carried her. All right. You know what? I think we've got a couple more pages. I'm going to stop here because it's already 7:30. So let me just quick wrap this up, though. Oh, sorry, 8:30. This is the contrast section. The whole first section of the book has been Paul defending his apostolic ministry, defending his relationship with the church, and then he begins to dismantle the righteousness through the law, and it creates a vacuum. Because if we don't have the law to govern us, okay, I get it. The righteousness keeps me right with God, but how do I stay right with my neighbor? And how do I then live without the law? That's an honest question. If we take the law, remember when you left home and you went to college, life without the law, what happens to kids? Not you, Elena, no, but
up till 11.
they stayed up till 11. Maybe you watched that movie you weren't allowed. Maybe you watched that movie you weren't allowed to watch at home. Without the law of your parents, because you haven't been able to self-regulate, right? Yeah. And then hopefully over time you've matured, you've developed some self-regulation, because if you can't, and that's what Paul's saying. Initially, the law was there for children. We got away from the law, and they're going, well, what regulates my behavior now? And Paul says what regulates our behavior is serving. The law of love. And now he's explaining what that means. Life under the Spirit, the law of love. And he fleshes it out by showing love, joy, peace, patience. He fleshes it out by saying, if someone's spirit wounded, go help them. And he's giving us practical illustrations and commands of how we live under the law of love, in contrast to living under the Mosaic law. And we'll wrap it up next week, starting in verse 3. Okay. All right, we'll pick it up next week.